Congratulations on your decision to become a caregiver. You are embarking on an exciting new career. You will realize what a difference you really make in the quality of life each resident enjoys. You can expect to make new friendships as well as learn some important skills. During this video, you will learn interesting information about resident care, your responsibilities, and professional conduct. Feel free to ask your trainer at any point if something is not clear to you. You may stop the video, rewind, and watch it again. The learning process during this training program is as follows. Number 1, watch the video. Number 2, complete the accompanying workbook. Number 3, observe experienced care providers as they perform their work. Number 4, under supervision, practice your new skills as allowed by your supervisor. And finally, ask questions about anything that doesn't seem clear to you. Never perform care that is not allowed in your facility or part of your job duties. Let's begin by talking about professional conduct. Our residents depend upon our professional conduct. Here are some qualities associated with a professional caregiver. Professional caregivers are cheerful. A pleasant attitude is always appreciated. Professional caregivers are empathetic. They see things from the resident's point of view as well. Professional caregivers are sensitive. Professional caregivers are aware of the resident's feelings when providing personal care. Professional caregivers are honest. It's important that we are always completely honest about the care we provide and what takes place during our workday in the facility. Professional caregivers are considerate. The considerate caregiver is concerned not only about residents, but co-workers as well, thinking about what is best for others, not just for ourselves. Professional caregivers are responsible. Completing all assigned care in a careful manner shows that you are responsible. If there was something assigned to you that you were unable to complete, always notify your supervisor. Here are some actions associated with professional conduct. Number 1, always arrive on time to work and work your assigned shift. Others are depending upon you. Number 2, dress professionally. You will want to make sure your uniform is clean, neat, and pressed. Make sure your shoes fit well and are comfortable for a full day's work. Your hair should be neat and worn in a style that will not interfere while providing personal care to others. Don't wear jewelry that could injure either a resident or yourself. Make sure that you avoid strong scented perfumes or aftershave. Some of our residents are very sensitive to scents. Number 3, follow your facility protocol. Do your job according to the guidelines set forth by your facility. Number 4, maintain confidentiality. Never discuss the conditions or care or anything about a resident outside of the facility. Sometimes very well-meaning individuals will ask you personal questions about the residents. We must never discuss their care. You should never discuss the care of one resident to another resident or their family when asked in the facility, unless specifically authorized or told to do so by your supervisor. Be cautious when talking to other caregivers in the facility that unauthorized individuals cannot overhear what you are discussing. This is particularly important at the end of shift, when maybe you are passing important information off to your coworkers. You'll want to do this in an area that provides for adequate privacy. Professional caregivers also remember, do not burden residents with your own personal issues. If you're having concerns at home or with family members or friends, do not bring those burdens into the facility and discuss them with the residents. Avoid gossip about residents, their families, or your coworkers. Accept gifts or gratuities from a resident or their family, unless specifically authorized to do so by your supervisor. Be aware of the language you use at work. Cursing or mumbling or speaking in an unclear manner can be very confusing for the residents. Also remember to speak in the language the residents understand while in front of them. Sometimes if we speak in another language, a resident thinks we are talking about them or perhaps ridiculing them. So it's important to always speak in a language they can understand when working in front of the residents. Professional conduct also dictates that a caregiver only performs those tasks for which you have been trained and can safely carry out. Before you begin to provide personal care, you will want to be very familiar with what is known as resident rights. In your accompanying student guide, you will see a full copy of the residents' rights listed. Read them, ask questions if anything is not clear. Let's talk now about these resident rights. As a professional caregiver, you will want to keep in mind at all times that the residents have the same rights as you or I. It is critically important that we always treat them with the dignity and respect that they deserve. Number 1, residents have the right to be accorded dignity in his or her personal relationships with staff, residents, and other persons. We are always to treat the residents with the utmost dignity. We do this by addressing them by their name properly. We also make sure that when we're providing personal care that residents are not exposed unnecessarily. We want to encourage independence, as this promotes dignity as well. We never want to ridicule or make fun of a resident at any time. Secondly, to be accorded safe, healthful, and comfortable accommodations, furnishings, and equipment. The residents have a right to a safe environment. While working in your facility, if you notice anything that is unsafe for a resident or furnishings that are uncomfortable or not working for a resident, let your supervisor know right away. Number 3, to be free from corporal or unusual punishment, humiliation, intimidation, mental abuse, or other actions of a punitive nature. We never have the right to embarrass or humiliate a resident. We never have the right to discipline a resident. If you are having behavior problems with a particular resident, and this is causing you concern, speak to your supervisor, but we never would discipline a resident. We never have the right to withhold care or personal services from a resident. For example, maybe a resident has asked to use the toilet 5 times in the last hour. You have many things to do in the facility. Still, however, you cannot refuse to toilet the resident simply because you think they've gone often enough. And of course, you'll want to report this right away. This is definitely indicative of a problem. The resident has the right to be informed by the licensee of the provisions of law regarding complaints and of procedures to confidentially register complaints, including but not limited to the address and telephone number of the complaint receiving unit of the licensing agency. When your residents move into the community, they are given a copy of their personal rights. Attached to that is the name and address of the local licensing agency. So if your residents would have a concern that could not be resolved within the community, they certainly have the right to go to the licensing agency. To have the freedom of attending religious services or activities of his or her choice, and to have visits from the spiritual advisor of his or her choice. Attendance at religious services either in or outside the facility shall be on a completely voluntary basis. We must respect the personal beliefs of each resident. They have the right to choose to attend services or not attend. They have the right to practice religion in any way that they choose, as long as it does not infringe on other residents within the facility. The residents have the right to select and attend the activities that they desire to attend. Residents have the right to leave or depart the facility at any time and to not be locked into any room, building, or on facility premise by day or night. This does not prohibit the establishment of house rules, such as the locking of doors at night for protection of residents. A resident must never be physically restrained in the facility. They have the right to leave the facility. Some of you will be caring for residents with cognitive impairment and working in facilities that have special permission from community care licensing for things such as delayed egress or the locking of doors. We may, however, never physically tie a resident down or lock a door in such a manner as to prevent them from exiting the facility. To visit the facility prior to residence along with his or her family and responsible persons. Residents have the right to come visit the community, see the operations of the community before moving in if they desire. Not all residents will want to do so, but it's important that they know they have the choice to visit if they would like to. To have his or her family or responsible persons regularly informed by the facility of activities related to his care or services, including ongoing evaluations, as appropriate to the resident's needs. The responsible party for each resident has the right to be kept informed about the resident and the care that they will need. If there is a change in status regarding the resident's health or well-being, the responsible party has the right to know. To have communication to the facility from his or her family and or responsible persons answered promptly and appropriately. Typically, your administrator will take responsibility for this, that if the family or responsible party has a special concern, staff should get back in touch with that family in a timely manner. To be informed of the facility's policy concerning family visits and other communications with residents. Upon moving into the facility, families will receive an explanation regarding visiting hours and times. Typically, family members will visit any time, day or evening, that they are able to visit their loved one. To have his or her visitors, including ombudspersons and advocacy representatives, permitted to visit privately during reasonable hours and without prior notice, provided the other rights of residents are not infringed upon. Residents have the right to meet privately with individuals that visit them. We need to assist them in providing privacy. Perhaps it's bringing an extra chair into the resident's room, or making a special spot in the living area for them to chat for a while. This does include the ombudsman. To wear his or her own clothes, to keep and use his or her own personal possessions, including his or her toilet articles, and to keep and be allowed to spend his or her own money. Unless prohibited by a physician, the residents have the right to keep their toiletries and personal belongings in their room. They have the right to decide what clothing they want to wear each day. Now, as a caregiver, you can certainly offer suggestions and lay clothing out for them if they desire, but they ultimately have the right to choose what they think looks good on them and what they think feels good. To have access to individual storage space for private use. We all need to feel that there is a corner of this world that is ours, for our own possessions, where we can keep private information. Our residents are the same. They need to have a space in their room for private storage. To have reasonable access to telephones to both make and receive confidential calls. Many of our residents will have their own telephone lines in their room. However, if they do not have their own personal telephone, they have the right to use the facility phone to both make and receive telephone calls. Now, your facility may have a policy limiting the length of each call if a number of residents are waiting to use the telephone. However, we must never deny the right to use the telephone to a resident. To mail and receive unopened correspondence in a prompt manner. We must never sift through the residents' mail, opening and reading their private correspondence. Sometimes family members will want mail given directly to them as opposed to the resident. We need to inform the family members that they should contact the sender and have the mail sent directly to the family, that we do not have the right to open the resident's mail without authorization. To receive or reject medical care or other services. This is a very important personal right. We may have a physician's order for a particular treatment or medication. We may know that that is in the best interest of the resident. However, ultimately, residents have the right to receive or reject medical care or treatment, in that they can refuse to take a medication. They can refuse to go to the doctor. They can refuse to accept a particular treatment. Now, as you will learn from your administrator, should this pose a particular harm to the resident or the facility, the resident may ultimately be asked to relocate out of the facility. However, we as care providers must be fully aware we may never force a treatment or a medication on a resident. Additionally, any refusal of services, medications, or treatments should be immediately reported to the resident's physician or medical provider. To receive assistance in exercising the right to vote. The residents have the right to vote for the candidates and issues of their choice. Many of them will receive mail-in ballots, and if they require any assistance with this, we should help out. To move from the facility. Ultimately, the residents have the right to move from the facility. We may not infringe upon this right by disallowing them the right to have visitors that may be assessing them for future moving plans and so on. As a professional caregiver, we just want to keep in mind that residents are us, only older, and they have all the same rights that we do. We want to keep that in mind at all times as we're providing personal care with the utmost dignity and respect for the resident in mind at all times. The facility where you work is licensed by the State of California Department of Social Services Community Care Licensing. Typically, facilities will have at least an annual visit. During this annual visit, the licensing program analyst will come on site to review operations. They will typically walk around the facility, checking out things such as the kitchen and food service, handling and storage of medications, as well as the general overall maintenance of the facility. They often will interview residents and may interview you as well. You will always want to be honest when asked questions from a licensing program analyst. Never answer a question that you do not know the accurate answer to. In other words, if an LPA is asking you a question and you are unsure of the information, proceed immediately to your supervisor so that they may answer the question appropriately. Want to be friendly and smile at the analysts when they are in the community checking on operations. Occasionally, a licensing program analyst may come into the community on something known as a complaint visit. This is where the agency has received a complaint. It could come from a family member, a resident, a visitor that's been in the community, a number of different sources. They will come out and investigate the complaint to see if it is valid or invalid and take appropriate action. The LPA may ask to see certain resident records as well as staff records. Again, always consult with your supervisor when working with community care licensing. There is another visitor that you will expect to see in your community, and that is the ombudsman. Ombudsmen are not always, but often, volunteers. They visit the facility on a regular basis, sometimes as often as monthly. Upon those visits, they are going to interview residents and ensure that resident rights are not being violated and the appropriate care is being given to each resident. Again, the ombudsman may ask you questions about personal care. Whenever any visitor arrives in the facility, whether it be the ombudsman, licensing, conservator, fire inspector, whomever it may be, you will always want to immediately proceed to your supervisor so that they are aware of visitors in the building. The provision of quality resident care is a team effort. You are the leading star of this team. As the direct caregiver, you play such a vital role in delivering quality care to our residents.